Welcome y bienvenidos to this episode of Love Learning You. And I am really excited today because we have a guest from France. Not only France, right? We have a French and an American. Is this going to be okay with the world, Mickaël? I'm just kidding. But I'm really excited to introduce you all to my guest today. And no different than anyone else, we're going to start by giving him his flowers. But I do want to introduce some context about how I got to meet this incredible individual, this incredible soul that gets to sit across from me here at the virtual table. And we met. I'll try not to get emotional, Mickaël, because we met at a time when I was just about a year out from my mother's anniversary when she passed. And so I'm quite sure your first interactions with me probably felt wonky because I tend to be an open book. And right in the context we were in too, what I did find though, and call it divine timing, I certainly do. But what I found was that was also the first conference. So I met you at a conference in France that you were actually hosting, and you are part of a network that I get to be part of now too, that felt so incredible and loving for me at moments that I really, really needed it. And that was a great feeling. That was also the first big conference I went to in person since the pandemic. And so that combined, and it was also 7 years almost to the exact date of the first international trip I had ever taken, which was to Bordeaux, France.
Oh, really?
Which is where we were. It was all such a big thing. Anyways,
Great.
so I can't wait to introduce you to him, but he serves, and I'm not even going to give your exact title. I'll let you give that if you want. But he serves as one of the leaders of the process communication model community. We call it PCM for short. But more than that, I know is an incredible father, just from listening to you speak about your children and share a little bit of your story. But most of all, I wanted to thank you. And the flowers I wanted to give you, Mickaël, is that I never once felt as though he hosted a masterclass, you all, that I was part of. He's very gifted at what he does. But you never made me feel judged for just sharing openly. And that was one of the first times, being a facilitator myself, that was one of the first things I've ever sat in my entire life, where I actually felt it was okay to just be me the way that I was and feel safe enough to do that. So I thank you. And I wanted to start by giving you flowers. I did also want to frame our conversation a bit because we're kind of communication nerds, so to speak. Well, let me call you that. I don't know if you claim that. I call myself a communications nerd for sure. But I did want to start with, I love to study Carl Jung's work. And I wanted to start with a quote that he has before we chop it up here and hop into our conversation, because I really do believe this quote. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. I'll read it one more time in case you're listening in the car and you're listening on one of our podcast channels. Again, if you're new here, welcome. Make sure you hit subscribe here on YouTube to @LoveLearningYou. Here's the quote to frame our conversation today with Mickaël. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to, you might have to correct me, Mickaël Dufourneaud. Please correct me.
I love it when you say it like that. Oh, there's nothing to correct. It's perfect. Thank you so much for those kind words. I am so glad to be here and be part of your podcast. The job you're doing is fantastic. I love your energy, and thank you so much for the flowers. It's yes, there was some transformation when we met, and there's a lot of emotions when you share and when you speak, and I'm just I enjoy being with you, so I'm glad that we can spend some time together sharing and talking about all the sorts of things that you are going to lead us to.
Okay. Anything else that the audience should know about you, Mickaël, before we dive in?
Well, the official title is Chief Master Trainer. I'm lucky enough to train the trainers that train the trainers. of the- Oh yeah, and that's the book I wrote
There's
with.
also his book he wrote with, I'll link Dean's interview. Nope,
Oh
there is a
yeah,
co-author, but
cool.
Dean has
Definitely.
been here before, so our audience knows Dean.
Excellent. Yes. What else? You can say it, yeah, as you said, it's the French way is Mickaël Dufourneaud, which is not that easy to say for English-speaking people. So Mickaël Dufourneaud is okay. Mickaël Dufourneaud works too. I like the international way of saying it.
I think that was one of the first questions I asked you was, do you prefer
Yes.
Mickaël, or Miguel? And then you
Miguel
then
is
you showed off
Spanish.
your Spanish skills.
Exactly, which are limited, as you could tell.
All right, well, let's dive into it. And this first question, it might be something that you already have that you utilize. I'm trying to recall if you came out to any music when you were leading us at the conference. But the first question is, you have to choose an anthem song to walk on stage to. What song would you choose? Or what is your song that you walk on stage to?
It's easy for me. Imagine John
Imagine
Lennon.
by John Lennon. And why?
Imagine.
You know, I have to ask why.
There's so many meanings. There's so many different interpretations, and the way that it's designed. So there's for me, there's many meanings. I don't know if there's many meanings for everyone, but for me, it's like a multi-layer meaning song. So it just touches my soul. Exactly.
Play it on the piano. Yeah. It makes me cry like every time.
Each time it's a word of faith for the humanity, and it also relates to PCM in a very, very direct way. And it talks about my base and also the values that I dream about for the world and for the future. So there's so many things to say about that song. I don't know how long it took for them to write it, because I do believe that it's Yoko and John that wrote it together, but it's so inspirational. It's just yes, I want to believe in that. But maybe one day we will not fight over stupid things or beliefs, or because fighting for a belief is very, very important, and dying for it, for me, I don't see the point.
We're like, oh, we are maybe not our ancestors.
That's it. That's
In
it.
some ways, in so many ways we are, and in so many ways we are not. And I think
Mm.
that that's beautiful that we get to evolve. I think we are living in a really special time right now. We all get to be part of a special moment in history. There's never been a moment like this in history of planet Earth. And we get to be here
Yeah.
doing life together. And yes, some of it's cleaning up messes that we are part of humanity. So yes, we got ourselves into. And but that is so much more beautiful when you have people who you can connect with to do that, and you have that
Mm.
shared value. And I think that, yeah, if you haven't ever listened to the song Imagine by John Lennon and Yoko Ono, please go listen to it. I'm gonna have to definitely listen to it again, but it's one of those songs I will never tire of. So it's very interesting you said that. It's never a song that I tire of. There's certain songs, and there's certain songs that always make me emotional. That's one of them.
Oh, me too.
That's
Definitely.
one of them. Okay, next question really quick, because this is kind of our cultural connector segment, and where we're just asking some quick questions to kind of get to know who's the man behind the myth. No, who is our guest. He's like, uh-oh, I need to get off. This is taking a turn. I did not sign up for behind the music. Okay, so this one is a time travel question. We get to transport back in time with you to one of your favorite meals to eat as young Mickaël, young Mickael. one of your favorite meals as a childhood. What are we eating when we go back in time?
I have an image that popped up. It's tomato. It's the tomato, the fruit. It's just I love it. I love
Mm.
tomatoes. But if it's a dish, it's more like gratin. Have you heard about gratin? You know, gratin.
Oh,
It's
au gratin. Wait. In America,
the first way of saying it. Yeah, please say it in English.
please, our colleagues in France are gonna just, oh, they're just gonna, oh, next summer at conference, Gonzalez, come on.
Yes.
Look, I'll give the American Southern accent version. Potatoes all gratin.
All gratin. All gratin. That's it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us though the origin, because I do know it's a French origin. So
Maybe. Maybe.
well,
I don't
maybe
even know.
let me
I
not
mean,
even
there's
say
a
that
few
because I was
different
like,
ways of
hold
doing
on.
I learned recently actually that you're not supposed to put cheese on top of it, but without cheese for me, it's not the gratin I'm thinking about when you're
Oh,
asking me the
well, who made the
my
rules?
my childhood one is my mother's one, so it's like the thin potato slices with the white sauce and lots of cheese on top of it.
Okay, so that reminds you of childhood.
Oh yeah, that's my Madeleine de Proust, you know, and my Proust Madeleine, yes.
Okay, what is that when you think back to that and your face lit up and you said, but my mother's.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about young Mickael and his mom and growing up in France. What part of France did you grow up in?
Depends, traveled a lot,
Okay.
but mostly near Paris,
Okay. Okay.
in the suburbs, near a suburb, La Défense. It's called La Défense. It's a business area of Paris.
Okay. And did
I
you enjoy that area when you were a kid?
Very much because there was lots of tunnels and areas that I could slip in and go from there, and just change, take a subway, take a cab, take a train, and there was many different things growing up there and being a teenager there. There's like the life was kind of wild in those areas. Like it's like growing in New York and growing and seeing the skyscrapers being built in front of your eyes, because that's exactly what happened for me. I saw the
Hmm.
entire area grow.
Beautiful. Okay. Now we're getting a bit more of a picture of the visionary. No, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. What's on your bookshelf right now? So what book are you reading or books are you dabbling in right now? Or when it right, I'm making an assumption that any one of us have time to read right now, but if you're reading a book, what are you reading right now?
I've always been passionate by personal development, so I've always read books about personal development and being uh, I'm in a training right now to become even better at what I do, and I'm going back to the basis. Going back to the basis means I'm going back to Sigmund Freud. So the ones that's actually on my bookshelf right now, which is on my bed actually, is the beginning of the theory of Freud about narcissism. It's very interesting to go back to the basics because we talk more and more about narcissism, and yeah, I don't know if you've experienced that, but on my Instagram account, it goes wild and it is a narcissist, he's a narcissist, she's a narcissist. It's
Oh,
like we don't really know what it means. So I'm like, okay. And I'm lucky enough to lead research with PCM, and it's also interesting to relate topics like that. So especially ones that come from psychoanalysis. So yeah, going back to the basics right now.
okay. I like
And
it.
I am actually eating those books because they are. I remember trying to read them like 10 or 15 years ago and just dropping them and just remember me snoring at them. Just But now I am eating them in like 1 or 2 hours. They're actually easy to read. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting how so much of our world shifts, but we shift too. And there's
Oh,
things
yeah.
that maybe, 10 years ago we would have never dreamed of doing. And then now we say, just like your example, oh no. So I think that's the other thing. I love it that you kicked off with your song being imagined, because that is what we're experiencing a lot of too. And we have been for a number of years. It's always been the plight of human civilization, but we are seeing a lot more of things in your face because of human evolution. And there's so many differences and so much nuance. And that's normal because growth happens. So it's interesting to watch the world as it unfolds. It's interesting that you are getting back to basics, as I see so many of us going, let's simplify. Let's simplify
Mm.
and get back to the core of what it is that we are really created for. What is our purpose? What is our soul's deepest yearning for the time we get to have on earth? And how do we make sure that we are still having an impact every day, and loving people? That is, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, is loving people where they are at. And that's even more challenging. And I know you and I are going to get into this a little bit. But that's even more challenging when it feels like we're speaking different language, right? And it's not just hablo en español y también en inglés. No, like we're not even like hearing each other. So, final question for kind of the cultural connectors. If you had to, and it'll lead us into some another segment, but if you had to choose like a recurring quote, so to speak, that comes to mind for Mickaël, that drives and inspires you for your specific life's journey and path, what would be that quote and why?
L'essentiel est invisible pour les yeux.
Ah,
Meaning,
oh,
the
beautiful.
essential, the essential is invisible for the eye.
Say that one more time, please.
The essential is
Mhm.
invisible for the eyes.
Wow.
Do you remember that?
That's deep.
It's coming from Saint-Exupéry. It's The Little Prince.
Oh,
Another baby.
I, yeah, wow. Okay. Break that quote down of what it has meant in your life to you.
As we were just saying, it's just feeling it with different eyes at different times of my life. I think this is, I think it's one of the most read book in the world right now. It's just The Little Prince as the multicultural tool to pass some messages
Mhm.
and essential messages for humankind and for us all. And that's exactly what happened for me, because I think the first time I heard it, I was very young, and it made sense. But what kind of sense could it make at that time? It's just I'm still wondering right now, and it's just know that every time I heard it again or reread the book, I just felt it differently. It's it it is so impactful and so reaching in terms of meaning for me right now. It is so true. The essential is invisible for the eyes. That's I mean it. Yeah. Okay. And what you were saying about imagine, it also relates to the song. It's just us thinking about the future and being able to create our own future
Yeah.
just by, okay, what do I want? This is also what it means for me nowadays, that sentence and that quote.
Beautiful. Yeah, that is. And I hear that theme coming up a lot, not just for myself, but with also clients I get to serve, of
Mm.
what is it that I really desire? Maybe you've done the degrees, maybe you've done the titles, maybe you've done whatever, wherever you find yourself today, if you're listening, um, you get to decide. Just remember, you get to decide. Okay, let's keep it moving.
Mm.
Sometimes we do a really good job of convincing ourselves we don't get to decide, and we create our own barriers. And I know one of the things that has come up in some of our work that we get to do in PCM is just miscommunication. Miscommunication in the workplace in particular. So I want to pivot us a little bit to some more professional questions and get into it. And we'll probably round out with some more personal questions to close us out. But there is a recent research study done by Brosix in 2022, and they said that there are 4 barriers in the workplace in this study that most trigger miscommunication. And based on your, like just your wide body of knowledge, as well as lived experiences, Mickaël, based on these 4 that I'm about to name, which one do you see showing up the most in the groups that you get to work with? And I know you work with all different types of industries as far as training. You travel the world. So this is a very valuable question for our audience. We do have a very global audience in over 35 countries right now. But miscommunication in the workplace, which of these 4 seems to be glaring as like the one beaming? Because they're all interconnected, as we know, but which one kind of glares when you're with groups? The first is emotional barriers, perceptual barriers, interpersonal barriers, or cultural barriers. Which one seems to be the one that like, it just keeps, that's the one that keeps getting pulled out in a lot of trainings that you're conducting? And if you need me to repeat them, I will.
I'm fine. I was hesitating at the beginning from between interpersonal and perceptual. If I relate it to PCM, there's no doubt it's definitely perceptions.
It was kind of a trick question for you, but
perceptual. Oh yeah, perceptual. Yeah. Because miscommunication goes back to redefining what communication is about. And communication is all about words, tones, gestures, postures, and facial expressions. So, to my point of view, the enemy of communication in the workplace nowadays is the email.
Ooh, let's get into it.
So many people are going to like, oh, I'm just going to write to him.
Let me get out. Wait, let me get my quill and my inkwell. No, this is my.
The wand is it looks like a magical wand.
It is, and also a pen. No.
I knew you were a magician.
I guess you could say that. So so that actually is what gets brought up in training spaces that you facilitate. Wow. Could you talk us through a conundrum, like a common one that comes up? Because I could certainly know from my lens, and a lot of my work has to do with cross-cultural communications. For you, and I know you work with a lot of corporate, is that I don't even want to box you in because I know you work with all sorts of industry. But in corporate spaces in particular, is that the one, and how does that usually come out in the conversation? That because we know underneath it, it's because there's a lack of body language to be able to see, but what are people usually naming and saying they want to do about it?
See, that's why we're going back to perceptions, because it's like the way I perceive the communication or the act of communicating that is going to be interpreted. And of course, the cultural barriers are there between countries, and there are signs that don't have the same meaning in one country or another. For sure, it's the same sign. It's going to mean something radically different.
Yeah.
In one country, it can be very positive, and the other one is like the worst thing to do or show to someone. But I still believe that the way we are perceiving the behavior by itself is going to be the most important in terms of miscommunication, because perceptual means interpretation. It's how I am going to interpret it. So That's where miscommunication begins, to my point of view, and from
And
my
if you,
experience.
again, if you're new here, welcome. But and if you've just hopped in or you're just catching parts of this, remember that our perceptions are also really, it has a lot to do with, I'm speaking in more of a metaphor, but it has a lot to do with where we're standing at that moment. One example being, for example, if there's crisis in the workplace. I was reading a book recently about 9/11 and the remembrance of it, and this man who had followed a lot of the families now for years and years and years, and just the impacts of this on the city, the mass trauma it caused specifically to children at that time and where they are now, et cetera. It was psychological implications of these different events that we're seeing happen around the world. But perception is about where we happen to be standing. And for many of us, we don't control the circumstances in the world going on around us. And so our perceptions are painted not only by our lived experiences and all of the memories that we hold, including trauma, including celebrations and joy, including moments, all of this. But then also in that moment, how I'm reacting and responding to, well, why did my boss say this? So our perception is painted by arguably millions of things.
Oh yeah.
How do you think that we as humans start to kind of notice better? I'm using language in particular because even when I do school visits with my clients, I call them noticing walks. They're not evaluations. They're not even really observations. We're just noticing what's happening and we're not labeling it as good or bad.
Yeah.
We're just going to use the information that we find to converse and see what we want to do and where we're at the continuous improvement process.
Definitely. Being able to put it
Yeah.
on it.
What do you think we need to do, in humanity to start to better understand our perceptions of each other?
There's another quote from Albert Camus or around if you have the good name, if you the good title to name something, it works better.
Yeah.
So
Well, I know from experience. Yeah.
exactly.
Failed experiences.
Having the right tag and being able to put the right tag means having the right amount of awareness. And it's definitely the work of a lifetime. The more we learn, the more we grow, the more we know that we need to learn more. So I
The
know
more
that
I know, the more I know I don't.
the more I know that I need to know more. So it's just an infinite cycle, which is so interesting. And for me, that's definitely how it works. But being aware of the mechanism of how it works, just what you described, oh, perception is a filter. So this is my interpretation. And knowing, being able to just name, okay, that's a thought. It's my thought. It doesn't mean it's my fault. It's my thought. So it's just so interesting to work on that and being able to put the right name on the right thing. Is it me reacting? Is it me having an emotion? Is it me? Well, I'm having a thought. Good for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And being aware in the moment that this is what's happening for me is the key for not miscommunicating. Because when I have the right tag, then I can name it and discuss about it. Just as you said, just I can now discuss with the person in front of me and say, okay, even if we have cultural boundaries, even if there are things that we cannot understand from each other because we don't know, well, okay, fact that we know we don't know is we are going to like step by step walk on eggs and be careful on how we treat one another.
Yeah. Well, our tagline at the podcast here is let's get compassionately curious together. And there's something to, and a lot about Nate's work, one of our colleagues, compassionate accountability. Hey, Nate. But for me, what that meant was, first of all, when you get authentically curious, when you're talking with someone, to me, that's an indicator that you actually care. So the first thing is, if you cared enough to go a little deeper and ask questions, you're sending a message to someone. Now, could some people perceive that as being nosy or invasive? Absolutely. And I've been told that. I've even been told, you're very curious. And I say, yeah, I know. It's the way God
And
made
I'm
me.
genuinely interested. Yeah.
But compassionately is a different thing. And I actually added that word as I've been doing some of my own research with my PhD and stuff over the past 5 years, and really exploring this newer field of cultural psychology and cultural neuroscience. All of it so much interrelates with just communications work in general. And I know communication is such a huge umbrella, but at its core of what we're talking about is in our normal world where most of us are not researchers. I mean, most of us are not, like, I might wake up, have coffee. I think about my grandpa's day or my dad's day. You wake up and have coffee, you go to work. If you're retired, you don't go to work. You spend time with your family, right? So, we often, though, and you all heard us say this, we have our noses in books a lot. So we're passionate about these things, we're talking about them, but when it comes to communicating with others and wanting to ask questions, do you think there's a wrong or right way to do that?
Yes.
Mm.
Should I elaborate? I believe there's a wrong and a right way. The right way is the way you were talking about, the genuinely interested way. As long as we are genuinely interested and compassionate about the person in front of us, questioning, not a problem. What I've experienced is that sometimes questioning is a very, as you were saying, impactful tool. And some people can feel like, where are you going with those questions?
Right.
So, as you were saying, compassion is the key element here, just to make sure that we are not digging too deep for someone that does not want to open on something. And questions are also a great key for manipulation.
Yes.
And I can pretend to ask a question, but it's not really a question. And what I only want to do there is you do something for me.
Yes.
Which is and it's ambiguous when we are there. It's just would you like to do that for me, please? This kind of question.
Could you do me a favor? Just a natural thing, not a calculated. Yeah. I think that is causing a lot of confusion right now. So let's get into that, because you brought up, you're getting into some of the classic Freudian theories. And we all know, we all have our favorite therapist on TikTok or Instagram we follow. But that has become the world. And because we have these algorithms, we have AI, and like any advancements in civilizations, we all have this opportunity to be pulled towards using gifts and talents. We all have them for good or for destruction, for advancement or destruction, rather. And I think what you're speaking to, and what I also I've experienced a lot over the past 5 years in particular, when you've seen this rise of people being more involved in community that way. And I think a lot of it was birthed out of the pandemic. And we're all looking at the same stuff. We're all pondering certain things. If it speaks to you, I think that we're in a very interesting period too, where I see many, many people, no matter how many titles or doctorates or degrees they have or experiences, no matter how young or old, no matter who they are really questioning, who can I really trust? And what you said kind of struck that in me to kind of go down this path a little bit, because I think people are looking for ways, Mickaël, to go, how do I avoid the person who has behaviors? I want to be very clear when I say that, because the world doesn't need us to go around judging a whole person. That person has an entire scrapbook of who they are and their life story and all their pain and all their hurt and all their love and all their joy and all the things that they know that you don't know. So when you make that assumption and you don't take the time to actually explore with someone beyond maybe their behavior or something they said, we also then create resistance. And the truth can't be right where resistance is. The truth is never revealed when there's resistance. There's always going to be parts that are held back, like they're held back. So I see many people being very, very cautious and saying, I don't know who to trust, or doing the opposite. That's not helpful. And saying, Mickaël said he loves himself. He's a narcissist. And it's like, people, whoa, you didn't take a 10-question quiz and decide that after 40 years of life, you're a narcissist. No. Where are you at with just this conundrum we find ourselves? Because now you see people doing a lot of things to protect themselves. And I think that that's normal, and I think it's natural. And I think that it's also part of ushering in kind of a new era of how we live and work and be together in humanity. What is a good step for people when we talked a little bit about questioning day-to-day strategy of body language? Because it's interesting. I actually had somebody ask me that once, a client who was requesting PCM for their whole leadership team. And he said, I need to have a one-on-one call with you, Gonzalez. And I'm like, okay. And he said, I'm actually really scared that if my boss takes this, they're going to use the information against us. And I said, that's a really fair question. But they were telling me that they really thought their boss had mental health issues. What are some tangibles for us out here, all of us on this blue planet? How can we discern? What do we really go with, especially when it's body language and we're talking with people? Because you're very expert in this. What are some tips for people who are feeling shaky, with their ability to discern a motive? I don't know. These are like big questions, but you help narrow it if you need to.
Yeah, there's many ways to answer that question, definitely. The first one would be I've been studying that for 15 years and I'm still learning. Because some people are expert at hiding things, and I myself see it coming but too late. Just that's the principle. Oh yeah. Oh, that was a good one. I didn't see it coming. And now I am enjoying it, the fruits after. But I think to what you were saying, if we go back to word tones, gestures, postures, and facial expression, is the first key is when it's incoherent. It doesn't match. And then second key is trust your instincts. Because it's afterwards, you knew. It's just, but it's hard to trust your instincts because that person can be so charming and so nice to be with and maybe charismatic and an important person for your maybe future career or relationships, and
Maybe
you want to go there.
Yeah.
You want to go there. You feel that it's wrong, but it's still no, maybe. So trust your instincts. Okay. The principle, that word we call it gaslighting now. It's just when I love that word because it's very self-explanatory. Just a gas and some light somewhere. So you see the light, you follow the light, but there's so much gas around that. Oh, I should have seen the gas. Too late. There was that question.
Yeah. Sorry.
It rings the bell. It's just
it rings a bell for sure. Right when you go, I mean, honestly, what I'm kind of chuckling because I was telling my friend about this a couple years ago, and I'm very much tried to also understand more of kind of at a universal level. Okay, what is this lesson supposed to be teaching me right now? Type thing. If I find myself in a situation where I'm experiencing distress, how can this lesson be used and for good and for my betterment too, and my better understanding and learning about myself. But one of the things though is when I often realize a pattern like that, and you go, oh, this happening again. This is like this other situation, but different, but really the same at its core. And then, so I'm chuckling because I had a time period where I realized this a couple of years ago about a business person that I was dealing with. And I literally thought of Britney Spears, and I just told, I told somebody, oops, I did it again.
Exactly.
I can go,
It
oh,
was
I
bad
really
that
thought
time.
I knew that person. I really thought I could trust that person. And I think then when you have those experiences, it's easy to go, number one, you start like I start to do, well, could I have done differently? What could I have done differently in that relationship and in that partnership to make communication clearer? Because I do think that clarity is a form of kindness, even if we
Mhm.
think, oh, I don't know if they'll receive that well. But if you don't tell them and you can see something clearly, then don't you have a responsibility, if you can have that with that person or whatever. But
Transparency is a key here.
yeah,
Transparency is like, oh, I see the light, but I also see there's a lot of gas around it. Can you tell me more about the gas?
yeah,
And that's a good thing too.
that's so good.
That's the key. Like trust your instinct when we go back to that. Trust your instinct. That's exactly what it means. And what you were saying about experience, you've done it once, you've done it twice, third time.
Like, oh, this
I
is
would
the lesson I'm supposed to get over.
relate for what you were saying earlier about people are more and more like protecting themselves because it's just it had I had that experience quite a few times already. So now I'm more careful and I listen more to my gut feeling inside. Just tell me more about all these gas around. Just why don't you tell me directly what you want from me?
From a psychology perspective too, have you been doing any deep dive work or done deep dive work with ego and the egoic
Back
states?
to what you were saying at the beginning about narcissism. Narcissism and ego are related,
Uh-huh.
definitely, and we need it. All of us. We need the
It
fair
protects
share
us. It
of
protects
exactly.
us. And I think
It,
that's when you see, I want to keep explaining this too and teaching this through different things to people because it's kind of an awakening I've had for myself because I used to think when you think like the term ego death, if you know that term at all, or like ego being crushed, I used to
mhm,
think, oh, that's good. And I associated it with pride. Like, oh,
mhm,
okay, yeah, I need to be humble. Um, versus now understanding from a psychological perspective and also doing a lot of just work around how we understand each other across cultural lines and cultural barriers. But I have a lot more clarity right now after the past few years. And now to understand the pattern of the defensiveness, all of the stuff that people are trying to latch onto right now. And I myself do the same. You do the same. We all do it. So we're not excluding us as people either. All of us do this. And it's because we want to belong. And we also
yeah.
want to protect ourselves and we have fear maybe from other situations. But the ego actually, identity, the word, if you break down the word linguistically, identity, id,
Yes.
entity, id means ego, and entity, it basically means an entity run by ego. So when we
Mhm,
say, Michael, well, he's French, right? I'm giving an example because I work in the cultural world. A lot of times people are still kind of baffled by the difference between nationality, race, and ethnicity.
my
Whole
identity.
other
Yeah.
book by Justine, but okay. But that being said, why do we think that humanity is latching onto, no, I believe this. No, I'm this and I'm proud this. Because you want to be attached to a group that's protected by ego. That's identity. And when we're not pulling from within and understanding that spirit and your soul purpose, that is when that noise, it's harder to discern when someone is either having a tactic that is for your harm and your destruction, or because they see you as light and they want to help elevate the mission and help you, and or you work together to serve. I think that's what I see a lot of happening. And unfortunately, perceptually, we
Mhm.
all often go, huh, why don't that person says it this way and that's hateful. It's true. We need to name hate. And also there's reasons behind that perceptually why people might be attaching to certain movements and certain groups because they just want to belong. And they also, their ego is trying to make them feel safe and protected and part of something.
That's deep. Yeah.
Tell me what you're thinking. Sorry.
There's many things that fired in my head when you were saying that, but it's just, I was thinking about a concept when you were saying ego death. I totally agree with you. We do not want.
Oh no. Oh, quick technical hiccup. Ego death.
Exactly. There was a death. I died with ego death.
He's
That's
back
exactly
with
what
a
I
new
wanted to say.
background.
I was fully with you with ego death. I don't think we want to have ego death. What we want to have a healthy ego. Healthy ego means respect, and imago is the self-esteem is the judgment I have of myself. So this is the balance we need for the ego. It's just, am I more than others? Am I less than others? This is this idea of a balance. This is a challenge we have for our entire lives, because each time we meet someone new, can we be plus plus? Can we be okay? Can we be at the same level and decide that any kind of human on this planet, whatever the culture, whatever the background, whatever the number of PhD that that person has, can I feel at the same level of that person just because we're human? And it also goes back to the intention then, because once I have my ego balanced and healthy, I have intentions, and those intentions will be the source of my perception and how I perceive things. Do I take it personally or not? This is also something important.
Yeah.
You know? You're not taking things too personally ever, because things don't belong to us. This goes back to the ego part of us.
Yeah.
So I think it's so interesting, that balance, finding the right balance in all the situations we're dealing with, whether they're cultural or not, because it's
Right.
all the things for that.
There's someone whose work I've studied at length. Ruth Benedict was her name. She was kind of a woman before her time in the 30s and 40s, and did such incredible global work. But her big thing, and I had this moment, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago when I first picked up one of her texts, and I'm like, this is the first person as a researcher who I could really relate to, as far as her methodology, how she viewed the world, how she treated people, how she humanized anybody that she was around, and it didn't matter. But also that resonated so deeply with how I strive to be and strive to live, and also part of who I feel I am. I have a lot of different relatives from a lot of places. And I think when I read her work, one of the things that stood out most was this isomorphism. And isomorphism, if viewers and listeners, you haven't heard that word, it's where things work symbiotically, they influence and impact each other, but also one isn't necessarily more influential than the other. In some contexts, it may or may not be, but hers was culture and personality isomorphism. And I said, no, that's what I love. But all that to say, personality is big. We love that world too. Do you think that most humans have a solid understanding of how their personality influences their communication patterns?
At what age?
18 and
so
up.
much.
No. In the workplace, give us a tangible example, like the groups that you train. Do you get the impression that we are improving as humans with an understanding of how personality really impacts our communication? Or are we having a bit of that period of time where it's like, we don't know if we want to evolve or just stay the same? Is there resistance?
I don't know if you've heard about that belief, but um, it's pretty common and it's multicultural to it. Like there are old souls and new souls. Have you heard about something like that? Yeah. Because if we take that in considerations, like whatever your age, your the new soul is doomed to not knowing himself. And, and the old soul comes out with the packages of all the other lives that he's got. So it's those kind of beliefs are interesting for me because it's I can genuinely relate to that because I can feel it. Some people I like age 7, they're like, wow, so how do you know all the things you know? And how can you be so aware of what you're doing and the questioning that you're doing, as we were saying earlier? It's like some 7-year-old, they question others like adults, and they have that curiosity of, okay, what about this? And tell me more about quantum physics. And I'm like, okay. When I was 30, I didn't have that kind of question.
To the soul when I pass?
Yeah, yeah. How does that relate to personality? That's what I wonder. And I think we have years and years of research ahead of us, just comparing to that.
Yeah.
We are just at the beginning of understanding human personalities, and PCM, like other models, they are just tools that project a concept, an image
Yeah.
of what the human
It's a
personality
framework. It's a framework for understanding and creating language and meaning for many of the things we all do. It's just putting something behind it, whether you choose human design or astrology or PCM or Myers-Briggs. And I think that that's a really important thing that it is another thing I see happening is people realizing you don't have to pigeonhole yourself, whether it's religion or a model or a framework. Like you don't have to say that's all I do, and this is the only thing I live by ever. That is kind of, I think, that one of the repeated patterns in humanity that we are supposed to learn, which is it doesn't have to be just exactly the same way that Mickaël eats his au gratin. Doesn't have to be exactly the same as everybody else. And guess what? It could still be au gratin. Au gratin.
Do you want it with cheese or not? That's a question of personality. It's a question, and I like what you were, because we started with a balance between personality and culture.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's the same with gratin. It's just in some reason in France you put cheese, in some others you don't put cheese. It's that you would be expelled.
If we taught psychological concepts through types of food, we would all have better understanding.
I believe that too.
Okay, well, to round us out, we want to get back to a little bit with little Mickaël. And this segment is called Inner Child, and it is just exploring. And we know in our world that he's going to correct me if I get it wrong, but, and that's good. By the age of 8, I usually say 7 or 8, but by the age of 8, developmentally, we all have our personality structure or kind of the energy of what our personality is going to be like, so to speak. Not that we don't adapt and can tap into how we communicate in settings and with different people. But when you were at that age 8, so you would have had your personality structure in place, what is a principle that you lived by or a teaching you lived by that you can still trace back to that age and you go, yep, that's still Mickaël. That's still Mickaël. That's still Miguel. That's still who I am. I know who I am. What's a principle that still sticks with you today?
Going back to the beginning, the essential is invisible for the eyes. It's because my first answer would be my principle is to not have principles.
And that was at age 8. Okay, so what were you doing by age 9? No.
I was in the tunnels in La Défense.
That's right. You did tell us.
I was exploring the suburban city
The
and
wild, the wilds of suburbia.
wild. Like, oh, there's no principle. The geometry, geography, architecture. The
Mm,
I think the greatest thinkers and artists are the one that decided to live by principles and then challenge those principles
mm.
just for the sake of it. And this is what it means for me. It's like, let's test the invisible, like great. Um, I was thinking about Giacometti. Giacometti, the sculptor, who decided as a principle to never finish his sculptures.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Giacometti, yes, sir. And just because then they would be alive, because they are unfinished, and letting the work being unfinished for me is let's have as a principle that we don't have any principles.
So you also, so you would agree with one that I hold, which is don't hold anything too precious.
Ooh.
Just be willing to chop it up. Like, I mean, I'm an author as well. You know what I knew it took you and Dean what, 4 or 5 years?
Oh yeah.
That's the embodiment of don't hold anything precious. That's where I learned that phrase. Was one of my first writing projects, because you can't, or you'll never take the leap. That's part of it, is if you hold something so tight, just like the phrase, if you love something, let it go. That's a beautiful, okay, to have no principles. I've never heard it said that way. And I'm glad you broke it down, because it proves perception, because many might hear that and say what we joked about, which is, well, he's running wild, no principles.
It worked like that with a book, because for me, writing a book was a process. And for Dean and I, when we were working together, like for 4 years, at one point we felt stuck in it. And it's at that moment when we decided to say, okay, let's get rid of it. Let's change it. Then we had the ultimate idea to make it be written by characters. And then it changed the way we perceived it, because we gave up on our principles of writing principles. We didn't know how to write it. And then
None of us ever do.
write a book. Yeah, that's it. It's just, it's kind of a letting go thing, like letting go.
The surrender.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to, I want to make sure that people know where to find your book, where to find you if you want to be found. You might be in the tunnels.
Find me. I'm external motivation.
But I wanted to close this out with another quote, and it's one I love. It's one I use. It's one that kind of has driven me for a number of years now. And I am feeling like I'm just starting to try to actually live it out, if I'm being honest, with understanding. And it will be continued, like you said, a lifelong endeavor. But I also love that. I love the concept of Kaizen, which is originally a Japanese concept that informed continuous improvement process. I love that. It's a lot of the work that I get to do with teams that I serve as well. And so paradoxes, Carl Rogers. Oh, see, there's my alarm to keep me on track. Carl Rogers, a great psychiatrist. When I accept who I am, then I can change. And the paradox is this: when I accept who I am. So one of the things I've been pondering a lot in these times is paradoxes. And you mentioned this a little bit ago earlier, of, isn't it interesting how then we realize it once we're in it and we've gone through it? Sometimes we don't, or we get the lesson again. But there's also beauty in that process. Just like if you watch anything in nature, it's resilient, it rebuilds itself. It doesn't really even need our help. And I believe that's by God's great design, beyond anything that we can hope or imagine, even though we're made in the image and we're extension of that same power and we have it within us. The great creator. I mean, I could study a leaf for hours, Mickaël, and it'll like, I'll get ideas. And paradoxes, one of them has been, okay, just as ugly as this tree was outside my window 2 weeks ago, it's the most beautiful thing I've seen on our block now. So transformation could take time. It could be rapid. Time means different things to different people as well, and how we use our time and energy. But paradoxes, I think if we can all try to be more aware of the paradoxes in our life and not hold anything too precious, that will also move us forward in how aware we become of our ego, how we're using it, our different things in our world and how we communicate. And I'll give a few examples that I play with for myself. And it's these things around things that come up with trainings, things that come up in my own personal development and healing journey, etc. But the paradoxes, it's like the titles. In the workplace, your title might mean everything. To your kids, that doesn't mean anything, right? It's all the things I am and all the things I'm not. In one world, they might mean something incredible. In the other, they mean nothing. So just like any labels we create or frameworks or anything, it could mean everything. PCM truly changed my life. Another story for another day. Watch my interview with Stephanie Barron when it comes out. No, it's already out. I share my story there. I'll link it with Dean's. I got to link Stephanie's and Dean's in your show notes, Mickaël. You know, it's all part of the family. But
We're connected.
yeah. But that I shared why really PCM changed my life. And it's been a stepping stone in understanding a little bit more about me. And I say a little bit because you can have an incredible transformation, but I would encourage each of us too to also be mindful of those high highs and low lows. And like you said, those balances of, okay, and this is joyful and this is wonderful. And can I still find joy even when there's thunderstorms? And even when there's the other things that are inevitably going to remind me that paradoxically, this means nothing. It might mean everything, but it also doesn't mean anything. That's kind of challenging, right? When people say, like, does it mean something to you to be a man? It could mean everything in a lot of settings and situations, and it could mean nothing in many situations. Same thing with being a woman. I use gender as the construct example. Okay, so to close this out, unapologetically living out your purpose. I know, and I've read your book, How We Connect. It's a great workbook, great tool. What else do you have coming? What are you working on now? Where can we find you? Unapologetically promoting yourself. That's what this final segment is, and really living out your purpose. Where can we see you perform karaoke?
Well, in Paris, if you want, from time to time, but as I said, I'm external motivation, so invite me.
He moonlights in the tunnel sometimes.
Yeah, what's coming next is lots of things. We have certifications inside the company. I loved your conclusion on paradoxes. I think paradox is the key point. Understanding those paradoxes is like and letting go at the right moment is so important. So I'm going to leave by that principle now. So thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me and having me. It was a great moment sharing with you, as I know. I love your energy. Keep your energy flowing. The world needs your energy.
Yours too. Yours too, my friend. Thank you so much for your time, your talents, and your treasure that you offer to the world every day. Don't forget who you are too. Thank you all for joining us in this conversation today on Love Learning You. I hope that you are living and loving well today. And I also hope that we continue to get compassionately curious together. Take care until I see you next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.